Great Ormond Street Hospital, London, December 15, 2024, 4:30 p.m. Tyson Fury, the giant standing 6 feet 9 inches tall who had never lost a professional fight, stood frozen in front of room 247, trembling. His enormous hands, which had knocked out Deontay Wilder 3 times, could barely hold a small pink teddy bear. The corridor around him buzzed with the quiet efficiency of one of Britain's most prestigious children's hospitals, but all Fury could hear was the thundering of his own heartbeat. Dr. Barnaby Wickshire approached with the measured steps of a man who had delivered countless pieces of difficult news over his 30-year career in pediatric oncology. His kind eyes, framed by wire-rimmed spectacles, carried the weight of experience that came from watching too many young lives hang in the balance. "Mr. Fury," Dr. Wickshire said softly, his voice carrying the careful modulation of someone accustomed to speaking in hospital corridors. "She asked specifically to see you. She said she has something very important to tell you." Fury's voice caught in his throat as he struggled to form the words that he dreaded asking. "Doctor, how much time does she have?" "A few hours, perhaps less." The doctor's response was clinical, but not unkind. "The cancer has progressed rapidly in the past week. We've made her as comfortable as possible, but..." Fury closed his eyes, and his mind immediately transported him back 5 years to a moment that had changed his life forever. In his memory, he could see a 3-year-old girl, bald from chemotherapy, running down this very corridor screaming, "Gypsy King, Gypsy King," when he had made his first charity visit to the hospital. Her infectious laughter had echoed off the sterile walls, bringing life to a place that dealt so often with loss. Primrose Atherstone, the little girl who, for 5 years, had fought leukemia with more courage than any opponent he had ever faced in the boxing ring. She had become more than just a patient he visited. She had become a symbol of everything pure and brave in the world, a reminder of why his fame and success meant something beyond personal achievement. "Mr. Fury?" Dr. Wickshire's voice brought him back to the present moment. Tyson took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to compose himself. "Doctor, she doesn't know that I'm going to retire next week, does she? I was planning to announce it after Christmas. How do I tell a child that her hero is giving up?" Nurse Clementine Fairweather appeared around the corner, her cheerful demeanor slightly dampened by the gravity of the situation. She had been caring for Primrose since her first admission and had watched the special bond develop between the young patient and the heavyweight champion. "Tyson," she said gently, "she's awake now, and she's asking if you brought the special thing that you promised her." Fury's heart nearly stopped. The special thing, the promise he had made 2 years ago when the doctors had first told them there was nothing more they could do. He had sworn that when the final moment came, he would bring something that would make her feel like the most special person in the world. But what he had planned now seemed impossible to fulfill. "I need a moment," he whispered, feeling the weight of expectation crushing down on his massive shoulders. But from behind the door of room 247, a voice that was weak but filled with unmistakable determination called out, "Tyson, is that you? I heard your voice. You came." There was no more time for hesitation, no more opportunity to prepare himself for what lay ahead. The voice of the bravest person he had ever known was calling for him, and Tyson Fury, the undefeated heavyweight champion of the world, had never been more terrified of facing an opponent. He pushed open the door and stepped into the room where Primrose Atherstone was waiting for him. The sight that greeted him was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The little girl who had once raced through hospital corridors was now confined to a bed that seemed to dwarf her tiny frame, but her eyes still held the same spark of mischief and determination that had captivated him from their first meeting. "There's my champion," she said with a smile that could have powered the entire hospital. Despite her weakness, despite the tubes and monitors surrounding her, Primrose Atherstone was still fighting, still radiating the kind of strength that couldn't be measured in physical terms. Fury felt tears beginning to form in his eyes as he approached her bedside. This was the moment he had been dreading for 2 years, ever since the doctors had first told him that Primrose's condition was terminal. He had visited dozens of children in hospitals around the world, but none had touched his heart the way this remarkable little girl had. "Hello, Princess," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here." "You took your time," Primrose said, with a weak but mischievous grin that reminded Fury exactly why he had fallen in love with her spirit from the very first day they met. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about me." "Never, Princess," Fury replied, settling his massive frame into the small chair beside her bed. "I could never forget about you. I was just stuck in London traffic. You know how it is." "Liar," she said, with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "You were scared to see me, weren't you?" The directness of her observation hit him like a physical blow. After years of facing the most dangerous heavyweight fighters in the world, after overcoming his own battles with depression and mental health, Tyson Fury found himself completely disarmed by the insight of an 8-year-old girl. "Maybe just a little bit," he admitted, his voice catching slightly. "That's okay," Primrose said, reaching out with her small hand to touch his much larger one. "I'm scared too, but we can be scared together, can't we?" Fury marveled at her courage, at the way she could face the most frightening situation imaginable with such grace and understanding. "Yes, Princess, we can be scared together." There was a moment of comfortable silence between them, the kind that only exists between people who truly understand each other. Outside the window, London continued its relentless pace, but inside room 247 time seemed to slow down, as if the universe itself was acknowledging the importance of this conversation. "Tyson," Primrose said suddenly, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "Did you bring it?" "Bring what, sweetheart?" "The special thing. The thing you promised me when we first talked about when it would be time for me to go." Fury's breath caught in his throat. The promise. 2 years ago, when Dr. Wickshire had first explained that they had exhausted all treatment options, Primrose had asked him directly what would happen when she died. With the characteristic honesty that had defined their relationship, he had told her the truth, but he had also made a promise that when that time came, he would bring her something that would make her feel like the most special person who had ever lived. "Primrose," he began carefully, trying to find the right words. "I haven't forgotten. I would never forget a promise I made to you. It's just that you don't have it with you," she said, finishing his sentence with the intuitive understanding that had always amazed him. "That's okay, Tyson. I know you tried." "No, Princess, you don't understand," Fury said, his voice becoming more urgent. "I do have something for you. It's just not what I originally planned." Primrose's eyes lit up with curiosity. "What did you plan?" Fury took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to say would reveal more about his own vulnerabilities than he had ever shared with anyone. "I was going to fight one more time, one final fight, and I was going to dedicate the entire victory to you. I was going to win a championship belt that was yours and yours alone." The little girl's face broke into a smile of pure wonder. "Really? You were going to fight just for me?" "Just for you, Princess. I wanted to give you something that no one else in the world had ever received, a world championship belt that belonged to the bravest person I've ever known." Primrose was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the seriousness of someone far older than her 8 years. When she finally spoke, her words carried a wisdom that would stay with Fury for the rest of his life. "Tyson," she said softly, "you don't need to fight another fight for me." "What do you mean?" "You already gave me the most special thing in the world." Fury leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What was that?" "You made me believe I was a warrior," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "For 5 years, every time the chemotherapy hurt, I thought about what you told me. Every time I was scared of the needles or the machines, I remembered that the Gypsy King said I was brave. Every time other kids stared at me because I was bald, or because I looked different, I held my head high because I knew I was friends with the heavyweight champion of the world." Tears were now flowing freely down Fury's face, and he made no attempt to hide them. "Primrose, do you know what the doctors and nurses call me?" she continued, seemingly unaware of the emotional devastation she was causing with her words. "They call me Little Fury. They say I fight like you do. They say I never give up. You fight better than I ever have," Fury managed to say through his tears. "That's because you taught me how," she replied simply. "You taught me that being strong doesn't mean you never get scared. It means you keep going even when you are scared." Fury felt his mind drifting back to their first meeting, when Primrose had been so small that she barely reached his knee. He remembered how she had insisted on measuring herself against him every visit, marking her growth on a piece of paper that she kept taped to her bedside table. "Look, Tyson," she would say, "I'm getting taller. Maybe someday I'll be as tall as you." The innocent optimism in her voice had always made him smile, even as the doctors quietly explained that her chances of reaching adulthood were diminishing with each passing month. "Do you remember," Fury said softly, "when you taught me how to make those paper cranes? You said they were for good luck." Primrose's face lit up with the memory. "I made you fold 100 of them. My hands were so sore, but you kept saying we had to do it properly. You were such a perfectionist." "I still have every single one of them," Fury admitted. "They're in a special box in my house. Paris thinks I'm mad for keeping them, but I told her they're the most precious things I own." "Really?" Primrose's voice carried a note of wonder that reminded him exactly why he had fallen so completely under her spell. "Really? And do you remember what you told me when we finished the last one?" "I said that now you'd never lose another fight because you had the power of 1,000 cranes protecting you. And I haven't lost since, Fury said, his voice thick with emotion. Not once. Every time I stepped into that ring, I thought about those cranes, and I thought about the little girl who believed they could keep me safe. The memory seemed to energize Primrose, and she shifted slightly in her bed to face him more directly. "Tell me about the Wilder fights," she said. "Tell me what you were thinking when you got knocked down." Fury was surprised by the request. They had talked about his boxing career many times over the years, but she had never asked about the specific moments of vulnerability, the times when victory had seemed impossible. "Which knockdown?" he asked gently. "The one in the last fight, when everyone thought it was over, when even the commentators were saying you couldn't get up." Fury closed his eyes, remembering that moment of impact, the way the world had gone silent except for the ringing in his ears. "I was on the canvas and everything was fuzzy. The referee was counting and I could hear people in the crowd gasping. For a second I thought maybe this was it, maybe I'd finally met my match." "But you got up," Primrose said firmly. "I got up," he confirmed. "And do you know what I thought about in that moment?" "What?" "I thought about a little girl in a hospital bed who had told me that getting knocked down doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And humans have the power to choose whether they stay down or get back up." Primrose beamed with pride. "I said that? You said that. And you also said that every time you had to start a new round of chemotherapy, you pretended you were a boxer entering the ring. You said the medicine was your opponent and your job was to keep fighting until the final bell." The conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock on the door. Cordelia Atherstone, Primrose's mother, entered the room with the quiet grace of a woman who had spent 5 years learning to navigate the complexities of pediatric oncology wards. Her face showed the strain of countless sleepless nights and difficult conversations, but her love for her daughter shone through every line of exhaustion. Behind her came Fitzgerald Atherstone, Primrose's father, a tall man whose gentle demeanor reminded Fury of his own father. Fitzgerald had been a constant presence during Primrose's treatment, often sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chairs and learning to navigate the complex world of pediatric oncology with the same determination his daughter showed in fighting her disease. "How are my two champions doing?" Cordelia asked, her voice carefully controlled to hide the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "Mommy, Tyson was going to fight one more time just for me," Primrose announced with obvious pride. "He was going to win a championship belt that would be mine forever." Cordelia's eyes met Fury's across the small room, and in that glance, they shared an understanding that transcended words. They both knew that time was running out, and they both knew that these conversations were among the last they would have with this extraordinary little girl. "That's because you're worth fighting for, my darling," Cordelia said, moving to the other side of the bed and taking her daughter's free hand. Fitzgerald approached the foot of the bed, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Primrose has been talking about this visit for weeks," he said to Fury. "Every day she's asked when you were coming. She's been saving up her energy for today." "Daddy," Primrose said, turning to her father, "did you tell Tyson about the surprise?" Fitzgerald and Cordelia exchanged a meaningful look. "What surprise, sweetheart?" Cordelia asked gently. "The letter I wrote, the one for Tyson to read after. After I go to sleep forever." The adults in the room were stunned into silence. None of them had known about any letter. "When did you write a letter, Princess?" Fury asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Last week, when you couldn't visit because of your training. Nurse Clementine helped me with some of the big words. I wanted to make sure I said everything properly." Dr. Wickshire, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped into the room. "Primrose asked me to keep it safe for her," he explained. "She was very specific about when it should be given to you." "I wanted you to have something to remember me by," Primrose said simply. "Something that would help you understand why you can't give up on fighting for other children like me." Fury felt as though the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Here was this remarkable child, facing the end of her own life with courage that astounded everyone around her, and she was still thinking about others, still trying to inspire and motivate the adults who were supposed to be caring for her. "Primrose," he said, struggling to find adequate words, "you don't need to worry about me. You should be thinking about yourself, about what you need right now." "But I am thinking about what I need," she replied with the logic that had always characterized their conversations. "I need to know that when I'm gone, you'll remember what I taught you. I need to know that other children will get to meet the Tyson who learned how to be gentle, who learned that being strong doesn't mean being scary." "Mummy," Primrose said, turning back to her mother, "can I ask Tyson one more favor?" "Of course, sweetheart." Primrose turned back to the heavyweight champion, with eyes that seemed to hold depths far beyond her years. "Tyson, I know you want to retire. I can see it in your face. You're tired of fighting, aren't you? Fury was stunned by her perceptiveness. How did you know that? I listen to things, and I watch people. Boxing is hard work, and you've been doing it for a very long time. She paused, gathering her strength for what came next. But Tyson, can you promise me something? Anything, princess, anything at all. When you do retire, will you keep visiting children like me? Will you keep telling them that they're warriors? The request hit Fury with the force of one of his own knockout punches. The room fell into a profound silence as the weight of Primrose's request settled over everyone present. Dr. Wickshire had quietly entered during their conversation, followed by Fitzgerald Atherstone, Primrose's father, whose own eyes showed the strain of watching his daughter's courageous battle come to its inevitable conclusion. Primrose, Fury said carefully, what you're asking me, I'm asking you to keep being a hero, she interrupted gently. Not in the boxing ring, but in places like this. Because Tyson, there are so many children who need someone to tell them they're special. There are so many kids who need to believe that they can be warriors too. Fury looked around the room at the faces of the medical staff and family members who had become part of Primrose's extended support system over the years. Each one of them had witnessed her extraordinary courage, her ability to find joy and hope in the darkest circumstances, and her uncanny gift for inspiring the adults around her to be better versions of themselves. Princess, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I promise you that I will never stop fighting for children like you. Even when I hang up my boxing gloves, I will keep fighting for kids who need to know that someone believes in them. A smile of pure satisfaction crossed Primrose's face. Good, because I have something else to tell you. What's that, sweetheart? I have a secret, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made everyone in the room lean closer. What kind of secret? Fury asked, playing along with her sense of drama. I never really cared about boxing, she admitted with a giggle that somehow managed to lighten the heavy atmosphere in the room. I didn't even know who you were when the nurses first told me that the Gypsy King was coming to visit me. Fury's eyebrows shot up in surprise, and despite everything, he found himself laughing. Then why were you so excited to meet me? Because everyone kept saying you were special, and I wanted to meet someone special, because maybe if I spent time with someone special, I could be special too. The simplicity and honesty of her answer devastated everyone in the room. Here was a child who had spent years battling a disease that would have broken most adults, and she had been worried about whether she was special enough. Primrose, Fury said firmly, you were special from the very first moment I met you. You didn't become special because you knew me. I became better because I knew you. As the afternoon progressed, Primrose's energy began to fade. The periods of alertness became shorter, punctuated by longer stretches of peaceful sleep. Dr. Wickshire had explained to the family that this was part of the natural process, and that she was comfortable and not in pain. During one of her wakeful moments, as the winter light began to fade outside the hospital window, Primrose beckoned Fury closer to her bedside. Tyson, she whispered, can you do one more thing for me? Of course, Princess, what do you need? When you leave here today, I don't want you to be sad. I want you to remember all the fun times we had, like when you taught me how to throw a proper jab, or when we raced wheelchairs down the corridor and got in trouble with Nurse Clementine. Fury smiled through his tears at the memory of their adventures during his previous visits. I remember. You were faster than me. That's because I had less weight to carry, she said with a weak laugh. But Tyson, I want you to promise me something else. What's that? When you go home tonight, I want you to hug your children extra tight, and I want you to tell them that there was a little girl named Primrose who thought their daddy was the best man in the whole world. I will, Princess. I promise. As evening approached, Primrose's family gathered around her bed. Fury remained in his chair, holding her small hand in his much larger one. The machines that had been monitoring her vital signs showed that her body was beginning to let go, but her spirit remained as strong as ever. Tyson, she said suddenly, her voice barely audible, are you still there? I'm right here, Princess. I'm not going anywhere. Good. I need to tell you something very important. I'm listening. With tremendous effort, she opened her eyes one final time and looked directly at him. You don't need to be the Gypsy King anymore. You can just be Tyson, the Tyson who knows a little girl named Primrose, because that Tyson, he's my real hero. She closed her eyes and took a deep, peaceful breath. Thank you for making me believe in magic. Those were the last words Primrose Atherstone ever spoke. 3 hours later, Tyson Fury sat alone in the hospital corridor, still holding the pink teddy bear he had brought for her. Algernon Pennyworth, his longtime trainer and friend, found him there as visiting hours came to an end. Boss, Algernon said gently, we should go. You have that interview tomorrow about your retirement announcement. Fury stood up slowly, but there was something different in his eyes, a determination that his trainer had never seen before, not even before his biggest fights. Algernon, cancel the retirement announcement. Cancel all of it. What? But you said you were done. You said you wanted to spend time with your family. An 8-year-old girl just reminded me why I started fighting in the first place, Fury said, his voice carrying a conviction that brooked no argument. It wasn't for the titles or the money or the fame. It was to be someone's hero. He looked back through the window of the corridor, where he could see the children's ward where other young patients were fighting their own battles against impossible odds. She asked me to keep visiting children like her, to keep telling them they're warriors, and as long as there's a single child in a hospital bed who needs to believe in heroes, the Gypsy King isn't hanging up his gloves. Fury clutched the pink teddy bear closer to his chest. Primrose taught me that being a champion isn't about never losing. It's about never letting someone else lose hope. And I made her a promise. A promise to a warrior princess is sacred. As they walked through the hospital corridors towards the exit, Fury made a silent vow that Primrose Atherstone's legacy would live on through every child he visited, every young fighter he inspired, and every moment he chose to use his platform to bring hope to those who needed it most. The Gypsy King would continue to fight, not for glory or recognition, but for the memory of a little girl who had taught him the true meaning of courage.